Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. I'm your host, Brent, the weatherman. Settle in and get ready for a conversation with our topic of today.
So maybe I'll just give like a quick overview of what mutual aid versus charity is. So charity is something where there's typically a third party in between a donor and a recipient. That could be institution like a church. It can be a not-for-profit like an organization. On occasion, it can be a governmental organization, depending on how the aid is actually going to be, the charity is actually going to be structured. But the key piece is that it is not direct. And in a lot of cases, if not all cases, a percentage of the funds goes to the organization that is doing the administration. So there's always a percentage of anything that's donated to charity that goes to the infrastructure so that the charity continue to operate versus mutual aid. And mutual aid is a relatively, not recent, because people have obviously been doing mutual aid for generations, for millennia. But to actually call it mutual aid and to put it into its own category of how you can support people is relatively new. And what it consists of is just giving money directly to people. No tax receipts, no organization. It is literally just facilitating or making a donation to an individual or a family so that they can make use of those funds immediately. And mutual aid has become very popular for a lot of reasons. One of the big ones is because it's very difficult on occasion to see exactly what charities are doing with your money. There's a great service in Canada called Charity Navigator that ranks charities based on their transparency, what they do with the funds, how much of it actually goes to administration versus the work the charity's doing. And what's true of mutual aid is that you know automatically that all the money is not going to an organization, it's not going to a fundraiser, it's going directly to the people who need it. Now, there's pros and cons to both, obviously, and I'm happy to get into those, but that's essentially what the difference is between the two.
Great, thank you very much on that. That actually basically answers a lot of questions I think that some people actually had for that one. So I have some questions lined up for you here today. So the first question I have is, how did you get started doing this work?
Sure. So I just kind of got into it by mistake, almost, just by happenstance. There was a gentleman outside my office who was a double amputee. I got to know him quite well. He was basically looking to try and raise money outside of my office for probably a couple of years, and so I would give him money, and he actually became a pretty good friend. And through him, I started to become aware of some of the bigger issues and started to get very involved in work supporting the homeless community about almost 5 years ago now, after there was an incident one night in Toronto where people could not access rooms, and it was about minus 30, and so central intake, which is the system that they use to bring people in when they need shelter and then figure out where they're going to go for shelter, had to start turning people away that night. And so I just saw this happening on Twitter, reached out, said, listen, we can get you guys some hotel rooms. And I've basically been fundraising in one way or another for folks, either for rooms, for food, for medications, for emergencies of all kinds, first and last, anti-eviction money. I've raised money for people in Atlanta to get into a house. I've raised money for people all over Canada. And now we have basically two mutual aid efforts that are running. One is emergency funds for anybody who needs it, but particularly for people with disabilities, who, obviously are living on so little. And that was one of the things that really jumped out at me as I started doing some work with the folks who are in the homeless community. I was shocked by how many people in the homeless community are actually disabled. And I learned recently that it's almost 45% of folks who are homeless are disabled. And that is, there's a direct line from government policies to the fact that people who are disabled can't keep their homes. It's just ridiculous. And once I became aware of the extent and depth of the problem, it just made so much sense to start focusing our efforts with people who are being most affected by this. So yes, as I was saying, we've got a mutual aid effort where we raise funds literally every day. I work with an amazing woman named Brent Potter who helps raise funds for folks every day. Mm-hmm. And then we have a mask initiative as well, where we're sending out 5 free masks to people with disabilities across Canada, because there's no provision in any of the funding or any programs to provide people with disabilities with high quality PPE as well.
Yeah. How did you become aware of the challenges of the disabled?
So the gentleman that I knew from my office, and also I live in an area of Toronto that's, I live on the waterfront, and I live across from a garden called the Toronto Music Garden, and there was a double amputee named Richard who was living in that park, and we would go out and see him regularly. I would go out and try and take him food every day. He very rarely took it. He was a very, very self-sufficient, very proud man. And unfortunately, he passed away in a ferry shelter about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, just before the pandemic started. So that was a really big wake-up call, I think, for all of us. He'd been trying to get his motorized wheelchair replaced with no success, and I started to see just the magnitude of what he was trying to deal with in order to just exist. And I started learning more about ODSP and payments and the system and caseworkers, and I was absolutely appalled, and I continue to be appalled to this day that we are allowing people who, have had injuries or have something that they've been living with their whole lives that forces you into poverty. It's absolutely inexcusable.
Yeah, it's quite complex on basically how the system is designed, right? It's designed to keep people in poverty.
Well, it's certainly, I couldn't agree more, Brent. And what it's not designed to do is to either maintain people's standard of living once they become disabled, or to give them a decent standard of living if it's something that they have been dealing with their whole lives. And there has been very little commitment that I've been able to see on the part of provincial governments across the country to making the situation better for people. And what we've seen through the course of the pandemic, as you will well know, is that people's costs have gone up. It's very expensive to be disabled and pay for the things that you need in order just to exist. And services have been cut, and it's just that much more difficult to get out and move around and get things that people need. So we really want to be able to provide some kind of a service that would at least make things better temporarily for folks until the legislation starts to catch up and things like cost of living allowances, et cetera, start to match what is actually people are incurring in terms of cost of just managing their lives.
Absolutely. Tell us about the programs you run.
Sure. So they've both kind of been evolutionary. The first one is, as I said, it's a mutual aid program. I work with Brenda Potter, and we basically raise funds for people on disability, or anyone really living in poverty who has an emergency and can't make ends meet, or needs groceries, or is about to be evicted. So if you come to Brenda or myself, we do it almost exclusively on Twitter, but if you send us an @ message or a DM message with the issue that you're having, if it's an overdue phone bill, connectivity we consider to be an essential service as well. So we will help you cover your internet or phone service. If you're behind on your rent or behind on a rental agreement, that's a really high priority for us. We want to be sure to try and keep people in their homes. So you can reach out to us, and we will try and get funds for you to stay in your home, along with groceries and medication. So those are really the four primary areas that we work in. We're not a source of income. We don't offer tax receipts. All we do is go out and find donors and match them to people who need help. And that consists of going out into Twitter. So somebody will come to us with a request and say, I'm $250 behind on my rental agreement this week. And as any of you know who've been in a difficult situation with the landlord, if you're behind now on your rental agreement, it means that you can be evicted that much more easily than prior to 2018 when the Ford government brought some new legislation in. Actually, sorry, I think it might have been 2020, but it was when the Ford government came into play. So we will go out and raise those funds so that somebody could stay in their home. We have a group of donors that we work with, but we just put public requests out on Twitter. We have never had a request that has gone unaddressed, and that includes some fairly large ticket items on occasion, like last month's rent. If it's a big request like that, I will often go out to a specific donor and ask for support around a specific amount, because raising something like $1,200, $50 at a time can be challenging. So that's the first one. So if you are looking for help, if you know anybody who is looking for help, has an emergency, either food related or shelter related, please don't hesitate to encourage them to reach out to us. And then the other one is our mask initiative. We are sending 5 masks of surgical quality, so N95 or above, KN95 or above, to anyone across Canada who is a person with disabilities. If there's multiple people in your family, we'll send you multiple masks. If you have kids with disabilities, we have kid-size masks. So all you need to do is get in touch with a woman named Holly Pollard, and I will put her name in my Twitter timeline after this is finished, and she'll put you on the list. We send them out once a week, and those are the 2 primary programs that we run.
You and Brenda and Holly Pollard are amazing people, Jennifer. You guys do amazing work to help people, struggle through the ever-growing crisis of inflation. I mean, it erodes away on the dollar value, what you can get these days. And that goes to show, how society, they come together, right? They come together and to make things better for people. And I just wish there was a lot more that would come out of that. And yeah, everyone's going through different stages during these difficult times. I mean, some people say 2022 was supposed to be a better year. I thought 2021 was a bad year, but we just have to go do the best we can and move forward and
not put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Brent. I interrupted you.
One thing my mom used to tell me when I was a kid, Brent, you fell down, you pick yourself up, you keep moving, right? And look at brighter days ahead and like different things. And and that's one thing that it kind of taught me about a lot of things of appreciation of people, of networking with people and what they've gone through in life. And it helps to everybody grow within and amongst each other, right? And you learn from each other as you go on. And yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, there's some dark times around. We have to look at the what is within ourselves, and
yes,
and also and so you nailed that one. And there's no right or wrong way in life. We just have to do the best we can and network with people when you need help.
Exactly.
When everybody, when you need help, please, like Jennifer said, please reach out.